Will you have your tray on a bed, ma'am, or on a table? Oh, Mary, something awful has just happened. This was a voice Sophie had heard many times on radio and television, especially on Christmas Day. It was a very well-known voice. Whatever is it, ma'am? I've just had the most frightful dream. It was a nightmare. A nightmare. It was awful. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, but don't be distressed. You're awake now and it will go away. It was only a dream, ma'am. Do you know what I dreamed, Mary? I dreamed that girls and boys were being snatched out of their beds and boarding school and were being eaten by the most ghastly giants. The giants were putting their arms in through the dormitory windows and plunking the children out with their fingers. One lot from a girls' school and another from a boys' school. It was also so so vivid, Mary. It was so real. There was a silence. Sophie waited. She was quivering with excitement, but why the silence? Why didn't the other one, the maid, why didn't she say something? What on earth's the matter, Mary? The famous voice was saying. There was another silence. Mary, you've gone. I was as white as a sheet. Are you feeling ill? There was suddenly a crash and a clatter of crockery which could only have meant that the tray the maid was carrying had fallen out of her hands. Mary, the famous voice was saying, rather sharply, I think you'd better sit down at once. You look as though you're going to faint. You really mustn't take it so hard just because I've had an awful dream. That 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 isn't the reason, ma'am. The maid's voice was quivering terribly. Then for heaven's sake, what is the reason? I'm very sorry about the tray, ma'am. Oh, don't worry about the tray. But what on earth was it that made you drop it? Why did you go white as a ghost all of a sudden? You haven't seen the papers yet, have you, ma'am? No, what do they say? Sophie heard the rustling of a newspaper as it was being handed over. It's like the very dream you had in a night, ma'am. Rubbish, Mary. Where is it? On the front page, ma'am. It's the big headlines. Great Scott! Cried the famous voice. 18 girls vanished mysteriously from their beds at Roden School. 14 boys disappear from Eton. Bones are found underneath dormitory windows. Then there was a pause, punctuated by gasps from the famous voice, as the newspaper article was clearly being read and discussed, digested. Oh, how ghastly! The famous voice cried out. It's absolutely frightful. Bones under the windows. What can have happened? Oh, those poor children. But, ma'am, don't you see, ma'am? See what, Mary? Those children were taken away almost exactly as you dreamed it, ma'am. Not by giants, Mary. No, ma'am, but the beat about the girls and boys disappearing from their dormitories. You dreamed it so clearly, and then it actually happened. That's why I came over all queer, ma'am.